Welcome to A Guide to Every Deck in EDH, and today we're looking at Oswald Fiddlebender. So Oswald is the artifact version of Birthing Pod. So 2 mana, and it's got white tap, sack an artifact, search your library for an artifact card with mana value equal to 1 plus the sacrificed artifact's mana value and put it onto the battlefield. Shuffle, activate only as a sorcery. So yes, the artifact Birthing Pod. So Oswald is going to be used to tutor up either combo pieces or Stax pieces in a lot of cases. So there are not actually too many straight up combos in the deck. So let's just go through what Oswald is doing. So card draw, we've got Archivist of Ogma. Whenever an opponent searches their library, you gain 1 and draw a card. Esper Sentinel and Sword of Fire and Ice, tutorable off of Oswald. Also, anything that is an artifact in the deck is going to get an immediate boost in how good it is based on the fact that you can sack it to Oswald and you can find it with Oswald. Also, anything that untaps Oswald so you can activate it multiple times a turn. For the combos, we've got Merwelder, which is a creature that says tap, exile target artifact from a graveyard, and it has all activated abilities of cards exiled with it, and Staff of Domination. There's Null Brooch, 4 mana, and it has 2 tap, discard your hand, counter target non-creature spell. So quite the cost at having to discard your hand, but we're going to be staxing our opponents out a lot, so this is not going to be too bad. We've got fast mana in Jeweled Lotus and Lotus Petal to get Oswald online quick, and then Lightning Greaves to both protect him and give him the ability to tap immediately, along with Thousand Year Elixir, ability to tap immediately and to untap Oswald. Also, these give the ability for Merwelder to activate immediately as well. Then we've got a whole bunch of lands, including artifact lands, because that's going to be relevant for artifact synergies. It also lets us sacrifice our artifact lands to get 1 mana artifacts using Oswald. And then a bunch of other things. Buried Ruin gets back artifacts. We've got some soul lands. We've got a Aganjo Castle and a Aganjo. Amiria's Call. We've got Homeward Path in case our opponents steal Oswald with a gain control effect. Mishra's Workshop, because hey, we've got a bunch of artifacts in the deck. Core Haven prevents all combat damage that we've dealt to target attacking creature this turn. Plaza of Heroes to protect Oswald, a bunch of lands, Mycosynth Gardens to copy artifacts, Treasure Vaults, and Urza Saga. For more protection, we've got Ensnaring Bridge to prevent our opponents from attacking us, along with Giver of Runes, Mother of Runes, and Skrelv to protect Oswald from removal. We also have Ranger Captain of Eos and Grand Abolisher to protect us from being interacted with on turns where we want to start sacking things or casting stuff. For ramp, we've got various pieces of Artifact Ramp and Deep Gnome Terramancer. Whenever 1 or more lands enter the battlefield under an opponent's control without being played, so when they fetch, you may search your library for a Plains card, put it on the battlefield, tap that, and do this only once each turn. Then we've got some removal spells. So Frantic Purification, destroy target enchantment, and it has Madness. This is relevant because we definitely need to be able to blow up opposing Stony Silence effects. March of Otherworldly Light, Path to Exile, Portable Hole, which as an artifact is tutorable, Skyclave Apparition, Swords to Plowshares, and Winds of Abandon. Then for stacks, we have a whole bunch of stacks pieces. This deck is going to be mainly a stacks deck, so we'll get back to that in a second. For tutors, we've got Enlightened Tutor, Expedition Map to go find lands, Urza Saga, of course, Weathered Wayfarer finds lands as long as one of our opponents has more lands than we do, Ranger Captain, of course, and Pyre of Heroes, which is a tribal birthing pod. So it sacks creatures and then goes find a creature that is 1 more and shares the same type. And then there's some other cards that I didn't categorize down here. So Saracen is just a beater. Iron Soul Enforcer is a 5 mana artifact creature, 4/4. Whenever it or a commander you control attacks alone, return target artifact card from your graveyard to the battlefield. So it's basically a reanimation effect. And then we've got Dollhouse of Horrors, 5 mana, and then 1 tap, exile a creature card from your graveyard, create a token that's a copy of it, except it's a construct basically. It's a 0/0 that gets +1 for each construct you control. It gains haste, activate only as a sorcery. Halo Fountain, 3 mana, and then it has white and tap, untap a tapped creature you control, create a 1/1. So obviously good with Oswald. Then white tap, untap 2 tapped creatures you control, draw a card. And then quintuple white tap, untap 15 tapped creatures you control, you win the game. So that last part is only going to be relevant if we've really stacked the game out and our opponents just cannot interact with us. This is a way for us to win the game. So the main deal with Merwelder is we can copy a mana ability from an artifact that produces at least 2, and then copy Staff of Domination. So let's say we get Staff of Domination into our graveyard, plus another mana rock like Mana Crypt or Soul Ring or something. into our graveyard. Again, this is easy because Oswald can find and sack these things. So then we go Merwelder, exile Staff of Domination, and exile a mana rock that produces at least 2 mana. So then the Merwelder has all of their abilities, and it can tap for 2, and it can untap itself using Staff of Domination's first ability for 1. So you generate infinite colorless mana like that. And then because it has Staff of Domination's other abilities, it also means you can draw your whole deck. And so that works with Staff of Domination plus anything that produces 2+. So Soul Ring, Mana Crypt, Mana Vault, Basalt Monolith, any of those cards will work. So then down here in the Stax section, this is going to be grouped into a whole bunch of different things. So the main downside is that we can't actually play so we do have a Null Rod in here. And this is mainly so that we can shut down opposing artifact stuff from our opponent. But obviously this is a problem for shutting down our own artifact stuff, but it's not too much of an issue because Oswald can always just sack it. So if let's say like our opponent is going to go off, right? Or they just have like a bunch of mana rocks or treasures from Dockside or whatever, we can tutor up the Null Rod. And then when we're ready to go off with one of our artifact related things, we can then just sack it to get rid of it. We then of course have Archon of Emeria as a rule of law effect, Aven Mind Sensor to disrupt searching. Bottled Cloister is at the beginning of each opponent's upkeep, exile your hand face down, and then at the beginning of your upkeep, return all the cards exiled with Bottled Cloister to your hand and draw a card. So this is just a way to go find something that draws us another card, while also keeping our hand potentially protected from like wheel effects or whatever. Chalice of the Void, why not? Although we can never actually tutor this with Oswald because it costs 0. Deafening Silence, Drannith Magistrate, Eidolon of Rhetoric, Aethersworn Canonist. We've got Grafdigger's Cage, Hushbringer, Karn the Great Creator, although we do not actually have a way that straight up combos with it, like there's no lattice or anything, but Karn the Great Creator. Linvala to shut off opposing creature activation abilities. Phyrexian Censor as another rule of law. Then we've got one-off turning off activated abilities in Phyrexian Revoker, Pithing Needle, and Sorceress Spyglass if we need to shut down one thing specifically. So if our opponent's going to win with, say, like a Baron Master Wizard that is looping Dockside, or they have Yawgmoth, or, just any one thing that we need to shut down. Another actual straight up just rule of law. Sanctifier Onvek as a way to shut down blue and black things from the graveyard. Sanctum Prelate as the creature version of Chalice of the Void. Soul Guide Lantern, Soulless Jailer, Seer Resistance, and Thorn of Amethyst. Spirit of the Labyrinth to shut down extra draws. Torpor Orb to shut down ETB triggers. Trinisphere does Trinisphere things. And then finally, Uba Mask. If a player would draw a card, that player exiles the card face up instead. Each player may play cards they exiled from the game with Uba Mask. So one big part of this deck is going to be using Oswald and then tutoring up Stax pieces based on whatever it is that your opponents are doing. So if you're against Storm decks, you're going to go try to get Rule of Law effects. If you're against Underworld Breach combos or other graveyard shenanigans, you're going to want Grafdigger's Cage, Sanctifier Onvek, etc. If you're against a deck that plays a bunch of specific mana values, Sanctum Prelate and Chalice of the Void. If you're against a deck that requires activated abilities of creatures, you want Linvala. If you're against an opposing artifact deck, you want Null Rod or Karn. It's going to be highly dependent on what exactly it is that you're playing against. But for the most part, you're going to basically Stax the opponent out by doing various things with Oswald, and then you're going to eventually just find a way to win either by just having a better board than what your opponents have, or you're going to find a way to generate a bunch of mana, potentially even infinite with Merwelder, and then win the game that way. You also have Null Brooch to potentially be a way to just keep countering stuff out of your opponent if you need to. For example, like the Merwelder can copy the Brooch, and then you can like untap it with 1000-Year Elixir, or you can just have it like you're not going to have too much card draw anyway. Like this is the extent of the deck's card draw, so being at 0 cards is not going to matter too much. You also do have like Ensnaring Bridge to protect you. So mainly it's going to be Staxing the opponents out of the game. And again, there isn't exactly a way to just like win immediately. There's no like walking ballista or just something that's going to instantly win the game. But you can effectively win the game by Staxing the opponents out and preventing them from really doing anything. However, you actually can just straight up win the game with Halo Fountain. So eventually you can just get 15 creatures into play and then Halo Fountain your opponent. You can also potentially just make really big construct creatures with Dollhouse or beat people to death with Sarah Ascendant. But again, you're just Staxing people out. That is primarily what Oswald is doing. So anyway, that is Oswald Fiddlebender in EDH.